Do you remember the day you got your license? I honestly can't remember too much from that day, but what I do remember was a promise that I had to make when I signed my name saying that I would keep all of the rules of the road. How many promises do we make in our lives? Better yet, how many of them do we keep? I used to think that that day, when I promised to keep those rules, was one of the biggest promises I ever had to make. And it was. But it could never compare to the promise I made to my husband the day I became his wife. Marriage is more than saying I do. It is essentially a contract between two people committing themselves to each other for the rest of their lives, and in some cultures, for eternity. It is a promise that is not only made in the presence of someone who has authority to do so, but it is also necessary to have it approved by the state in which it's performed by receiving a marriage license. With so much put into the requirements of marriage, infidelity in marriage should be against the law. Some requirements vary per se, but in general there are 6 requirements that you will always need to follow to become eligible for marriage and to be approved. Each person must be 18 years or older unless given consent from a legal guardian for that underage person or consent from a judge. In most states, in order to receive a marriage license, you will need to present 2 forms of identification, such as a valid driver's license, social security card, birth certificate, or passport. You must have sufficient mental capacity, which is a requirement for all contracts. Marriage requires 2 consenting people. If either person cannot or does not understand what it means to be married, due to mental illness, drugs, alcohol, or other factors affecting judgment, then the person does not have the capacity to consent and the marriage is not valid. There also has to be a set waiting period between the time when the marriage license is received and when the ceremony is performed. The waiting period usually is around 2 to 5 days, though it can vary between states. Performance of marriage ceremony with a witness and a person recognized by the state to have the authority to perform the marriage ceremony, such as a priest, rabbi, or judge, is necessary. They then have to make sure to fill out the marriage license in the places where it says to do so, and then return it back to the state so that it can be approved. You cannot legally be married to another person when you are trying to be approved for marriage. If you have been married before, you also have to provide proof of termination of said marriage through either death or divorce. From these requirements, we see that each person must put in effort and time to be recognized as married. Each person knows exactly what they're committing to and agrees to it in sound mind. But what exactly are they committing to? What exactly is marriage? In the Electric Law Library, it states that marriage is a contract made in due form of law, by which a free man and a free woman reciprocally engage to live with each other during their joint lives, in a union which ought to exist between a man and a wife. Marriage is a contract intended in its origins to endure till death of one of the contracting parties. From this we learn that it is not only a promise to each other, but a contract until death. When we promise someone to be with them, to support them and to love them until death, or in some cases eternity, we are held responsible to keep that promise, just as we are held responsible to keep promises made in any other situation, such as receiving a driver's license. Marriage is one of the few binding contracts that, if broken, there are few repercussions through the law. However, there are actually already 21 states in which adultery or infidelity is against the law. These states include New Hampshire, Virginia, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Maryland, Arizona, Kansas, Florida, Oklahoma, Idaho, Utah, New York, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, among many other states. When studying the reasoning behind this, John Turley, a professor of public interest law, stated that adultery is a clear violation of the contractual obligation between a married couple and a rather obvious evidence of a loss of intimacy and fidelity. He explains that while some claim that this is a private matter and a decision of the spouse to stay faithful, adultery actually has been many negative effects on the spouse and the community and is more than a moral obligation. Some positive negative effects of adultery are: if religious, one can suffer serious consequences through church action. But aside from religion, adultery can result in the need for counseling, the reputation of the family, not only the parents, being ruined, divorce, which could lead to hardships on the children if they have them, depression, guilt, having a child with the person the adulterous action is committed with, spread of disease, repercussions on work and self-promoted businesses, and health consequences. Because adultery does not only affect you, but others as well, the law should find proper punishment to apply when this contract has been broken, just as they do when someone negatively affects others while breaking other laws. For example, if someone texts while driving and hits someone, they do not only hurt themselves, but they hurt others because of their choice, resulting in lawful consequences. Another example is if an employee breaks the rules while they at work, their employer can dismiss them by law, and depending on the case, they can receive other lawful punishments through the government. Marriage is more than a promise. It is a lawful contract and commitment between two people, and it is recognized by law. It should be illegal to break this contract in every state, just as it is illegal to break any other contract recognized by law. Keeping our promises is more than a moral responsibility. It is a necessity and should be seen as such. While in many cases our word is enough, when the law is involved in the placement of a contract, it should also be involved in the breaking of one.